Matthias is the president of Free Software Foundation Europe. He works directly with government, company, organization to explain the huge benefit of free software. Simon Phipps is the director of standard and policy for open source initiative. He has a vast background. He worked in a strategic level in a major tech company like IBM and Sun Microsystems. And Karen, we know, the cyber lawyer. And here he is also as executive director of Software Freedom Conservancy. So let's start. At the beginning of the event, Ulrich Stolfen said, in a world of black box, free software is light. And this is true. We are living in AI agent economy. In chatbot, people talk with software, and the people with voice create code. That's a huge change. So my question is simple, and I will start with you. What does it mean today? Make ethical choices in software development in this new world, in this new era, when innovation are faster than regulation. Something is changed. Something seems changed.
So, I mean, there was always the responsibility of people who are developing and shaping technology, in what way they are doing this, and how they are then influencing society with this. So if I decide that I write proprietary software, I don't allow others to use software for whatever they want to use it. I don't allow them to study how the software works, and therefore prevent them from understanding how the environment around them actually works and talk about the findings of how the software works. They don't allow how to share it with others, so limit this, how much you can help others around you. And they might not allow you to make modifications to the software. So think that how the software was done before is the way how everyone should use it, and that people are not different, that organizations are not different, that governments are not different. And that was true already when the free software movement started in the 1980s. And over the years, what we saw was that this responsibility that those of us who shape technology have towards society was just increasing, because technology has so much more influence on our society. So nowadays, it's even more important that you think about, do you really want to have the responsibility that you thought about all the different aspects of your technology? If you can answer this with yes, then you might be able to develop proprietary software. But if you are not sure about that, and if you don't want to take the responsibility, where nowadays your mistake might afterwards create the death of many people, then it would be better choice to allow others to make those modifications and together shape technology.
You? Because, big tech are 5, 6 big company, and they have all LLM, and they have all a large language model, and they have this technology. Yeah. So is it true? We have an open weight, but it's different market, I think.
Well, the key to an ethical future is ethical people.
Yeah.
Really, you can't force people to be ethical. You can create systems that exclude people who are not ethical, but we don't have one of those systems at the moment. In fact, we have a system that rewards people for being unethical. The word unethical is not really the right choice. Most of the worst people in big tech are amoral. They don't consider themselves to be unethical. They just prefer not to think about it. And they prefer to think about the thing that lets their corporation achieve its objectives. And so to behave ethically is to stand your ground in a corporation. But most of us are not in a position where we can afford to stand our ground and remain employed and still feed our families. And so many of us as individuals feel a sense of being overwhelmed by this current world of tech. And so I believe the thing to do is to change the system so that ethical people are rewarded instead of penalized. And so that's the thing that I'm mostly doing at OSI, is not focusing so much on at the individual level, but we're trying to change the law. We're trying to change the way that people do business. We're trying to resist people who want to do unethical things systemically. And that's one of the reasons why, so the three of us know each other really well. And we've talked often about this subject. And it turns out we kind of agree with each other. So this is going to be a very boring panel, I'm sorry. Because we're unlikely to argue.
I disagree with that.
Yes, absolutely. We're unlikely to argue very much. So that's my take, is that ethics is for people, and the things that I need to do are to change the system so that the ethical people can live the true life they want to, rather than the false life that human needs force them to.
It's interesting. Many of these questions are not new questions fundamentally, right? When I was a young student in engineering school myself in the United States, I was part of a new initiative where they were inspired by a program in Canada, and they had a program called the Order of the Engineer. And so we studied failures of engineers throughout time, and then we swore an oath to be ethical with our use of technology. And as a symbol of that oath, I'm sad I'm not wearing it today, but you're given a ring, an iron ring that you wear on the little finger of your working hand, which is inspired by a famous bridge that collapsed, so that we always remember the people who died from our work. And while I completely agree that the changes that we need to make are systemic, I think what's so exciting about free and open source software, and exciting about the moment we're in today, is that individual engineers and developers in particular have so much opportunity to influence the way our technology is going. And that's, I think really an unusual, different situation. And we as a community have the opportunity to stand up for the ethics that we believe in and to work on technologies. And what's fun is that, yes, these big technologies are controlled by major companies who have computing resources, but the things that they said that were impossible with Linux back in the day, they also said were impossible, and we made it happen. And so I think if we come together and we bring our resources and our minds together, I think we have the opportunity to stand up for ethics and technology in a way that's unprecedented.
Yes.
Do you think we, globally should push the toast pause, cioè stop, and rewrite the rules of the software system?
It would be
Elon Musk under big people, property company said stop.
If there was a button, I would advocate pushing it, but there is no such button.
Yes.
So the discussion that we're having here, there's two aspects to ethics in technology. There's supply and demand. And the supply of ethics is very strongly biased towards free and open source software. And the demand for ethics comes from regulation and legislation and market dynamics. And we have to address both. We can't afford to only speak at the personal level and not do the systemic. And we can't afford to only do the systemic and not work at the personal level.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake that we as a movement made early, was that we really made it about the individual and the individual's choices in terms of solving the big problems, when really there's a limit. If I use Linux instead of Windows, that's a good step, and I can be an advocate and I can bring my community in. But as one individual, there's a limit to what I can do, and so putting that burden on people and making sort of purity tests is sort of a real part of the movement was not necessarily the smartest thing that we did. But the wise part about it was that it got people to be so excited that they built the communities and they built that systemic change. And so the line between an individual participation in the solution and the systemic solution is definitely not as clear as I think it might otherwise seem.
How is the sentiment of the movement for the AI? The sentiment, how your people, the free software movers think about artificial intelligence? They ask you to change ethic, to changing something?
Asking about AI and how the movement feels about it.
If you have an idea, or your opinion, just your opinion.
I think, meanwhile, the movement for software freedom, it's so huge and diverse that I think we have all the different positions in our movement from, it will solve everything, give us money, we will do whatever you want with it, to we should never do that, it's the tool of the evil. We have everything there. So I think that's something where it's very hard to say.
To have one.
There are so many different organizations, meanwhile, so many different organizations in the free software movement who have different ethical beliefs, who have different goals, what they want to accomplish with this. I think that the main thing that unites them is that they agree that software should give you the 4 rights to use, study, share, and improve. And beside that, many different organizations focusing on different topics. Some of them front runners in AI technology, others, first of all, like, what is AI? We should have a discussion about that before we have discuss about what to do with it.
Okay.
To pick up Karen's comment and join it onto there, the deal here is that we focused a lot on personal engagement with software. And one of the key aspects of software freedom and the software freedom movement in all of its aspects is a focus on personal ethics and personal responsibility. And when your computing is done on someone else's computer, very little of that ethical basis is applicable. And the big mistake we've made as a software freedom movement is to say, cloud, we're not going there, instead of working out what does software freedom mean in the cloud. And now we're facing the same with AI. We're facing a movement that is describing AI as laundering the GPL of software and is describing it as the theft of people's intellectual property. And we're going to fail to engage in a way that ensures people stay free people if we decide to just say no, we don't do AI. Now, I don't know what the solution to that problem is, because the world of big tech AI, and in particular the bubble of little companies showing up everywhere to get money and do what they call AI, is a very strong force that it's very hard to resist. Several of us have tried in different ways to try and engage with that. Conservancy has, OSI has. I would say that generally we have made negligible impact on the tidal wave of the. I'm talking about bubbles and tidal waves. But the tidal wave of AI is very hard to engage with, and I think we need to think more deeply as a community about what we're going to do, because just saying no, we're not going to go there, is going to lead to a world run by AI with no software freedom in it, and we can't allow that to happen.
On the other hand, I think, the movement for software freedom consists of so many people who strongly care about ethical aspects of technology, and therefore it's also systematically in the movement that there are people who are a bit more critical about new technology. So just because someone has internet in their company description at that time didn't mean that you were throwing money at them, but were a bit more critical. And that was also then with cloud. People in the software freedom movement were also a bit more critical about that and what it actually means. And I think we now also see that for AI. And I think that is also then something which is fine. Like, I mean, there are a lot of people who care deeply about society, about our democracy. So just moving fast and breaking things is not always the best approach when you care about ethics. So we can also sometimes take the time, see what is happening, and then think about where do we want to go. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be part of the discussion, but I mean, when you think about democracy and ethics, we should think about decades and not in months.
Free software does often move slower and creates strong products as a result, and strong software and strong alternatives. I would say that these issues around so-called AI have really been tearing up the free software communities because folks that have been very aligned ethically for a long time have different views on the same issues, just as Matthias is saying. And so, I think it's there's so many aspects to this that I think that both sides can be true, which is that many of these LLMs can be copyleft washing machines and building proprietary software on the backs of rich copylefted material, and then the courts will probably decide to some extent the results of that. But at the same time, we can acknowledge that over time it's going to be very challenging for experienced developers to avoid using these proprietary tools, and that free software may take a major hit if we do that. And we have to really evaluate the very real consequences of the world we're living in and the technology we're facing like now.
Question about for Phipps. Many people want to add ethical rule to open source license, like banning AI use or military. What's your position?
Okay, so we have to remember that free and open source software licenses are a tool. They're not our objective. Our objective is to ensure that people have software freedom and that their lives remain under their control. Our goal is personal autonomy. And licensing can only go so far. Now, a free and open source license creates a base of software that is maintained by a community or used by a community and has a critical mass. And that arises from there being no need for anybody to have a relationship with the licenser. So the person that licenses the software, if they have any requirement that you have a relationship with them, then the software is almost certainly not free and open source software. Now, when you add ethical clauses into licenses, you make them subjective. You make them licenses where the only way you can be sure that you have the freedoms you need to do the next thing you want to do is to find a third party to advise you. And that creates a situation where people are unsure whether they have the necessary freedoms. I believe the correct way to go about things is to use free and open source licenses and additional tools. So use additional tools such as community controls. If you are a community of code, there's no reason you have to accept other people's commits. They can use their software freedom with the code, but if they don't get updates because they're excluded from the community, if they can't commit changes because they're excluded from the community, their costs will rise and their desire to be detached will diminish. And there are other tools, such as on the AI Act in Europe, has been applying controls to what people can do with AI. So I'm not completely opposed to there being these so-called ethical clauses in licenses, but there are none in any licenses from that either OSI approves or the Free Software Foundation recognizes. And the reason for that is because they introduce the need for additional permission from another party, or at least uncertainty that might lead to that. And so far, none of us has been convinced that the cost on personal freedom justifies introducing that ineffective step. Because after all, what does ethics mean? Ethics is you know it when you see it. And I'll give you an example of this. When I was young, South Africa was a country that was run by a white elite. And it was a country that had a policy called apartheid. And many of us in the rest of the world decided that was evil. And so we decided that we would not do anything that supported the South African government. And so people licensed their software with clauses in the licenses that said that the software could not be used by the police force of South Africa. Now, when apartheid ended, all of that technology was still licensed with those restrictive clauses. And so the incoming group of people running the country found that they found it very difficult to buy modern technology to bring about the revolution of forgiveness that South Africa then experienced. And that was because the clauses were based on an ethical evaluation that went out of date. And so the best place for ethical clauses is in a place where we can build consensus around ethics, not in a boring mechanical copyright license or copyright-derived license, which can only go so far.
Do you agree?
I don't think licenses are boring.
Of course.
Okay, exciting licenses then, Karen.
Okay. Matthias, free software organizations sometimes work for government, I don't know. If a state or agency does something that is ethically questionable, no? What is your moral line that you pursue?
So,
not a simple question, I know.
So I started mainly interacting with governments, government officials in around 2005. And at that point, people were either not interested or they were also against free software. And a lot of them had also policies where I personally completely disagreed with in other aspects. So the question is, where would we be nowadays if I myself and others working in this field would have said, like, I disagree with you on those policy decisions or on your party program, so I don't talk with you, I don't interact with you, I don't try to explain you why free software is important, why they should make sure that the regulations they are working on should not prevent free software development or free software use, or why they should actually do policies that encourage free software development and use. So that's something which is, for all those years, you have to talk with people who have different positions. You have to talk with people with whom you don't agree with. And there were people from political parties at that time who were opposed to free software. And a few years ago, they had something in their party program about public money, public code. So over the time, you are able to talk with people in those parties. You have to identify the right people to talk to, and then you can also make a change there. And so nowadays, yeah, it's often nowadays we have a different problem. Nowadays, you don't get the response, oh, you want to talk about software and IT, please talk to our admins. Nowadays, you get so many requests from regulators around the world who say, like, we have this regulation, can you help us to understand this aspect of technology, this aspect of technology, or that aspect of technology? You have people from different parties asking you for advice, and you have to make very hard priorities. With whom do you work? With your spare resources. I mean, all three of us, SFC, OSI, FSFE, we are financing ourselves with donations. And we have to make sure that we efficiently use those donations to make the biggest impact for free software. So you have to make a hard decision with whom do you work and with whom you do not work, because it's not about you disagree with their position, but it's about if you work with that person, you will not make a change. And then you also not just have to think about it at the moment, but you have to think about how do we make a change in the long run? Because you could easily sometimes get some majorities to do one thing at one time, but you prevent yourself from going in the long run into the right direction, because when you work with that person in policy debates, another one who is more powerful in the future will not work with you, or the way how you interact with one person prevents how you will be able to work with others. So there's a lot of long-term decisions you have to consider there. And yes, I mean, in this, the ethical beliefs of the people there are of course also a consideration, because for the long run you would rather like to work with those who share your ethical beliefs, who share about, like in the case of Free Software Foundation Europe, we care about democracy, we care about respecting other people, no matter where they are from. So if you care about this, then you also take a decision about with whom you work at a time, even if that means that in a short term you have less media attention for a topic, or you have not some short-term gains out of this, but you move slowly but steadily in the right direction.
A question for Karen. Software Freedom Conservancy defend the GPL, General Public License, by taking legal action. Okay. What ethical guideline do you use to decide when to enforce a copyleft against a huge corporation or a smaller company?
Well, as Matthias mentioned, SFC is quite small, like all of our organizations, and we depend on donations. So we do as much as we can with the resources we have, and I'm so excited to see that our work is really getting out there and people know about it, because the number of violation reports that we are getting has been increasing steadily over the years. I'm not excited to see that there are more violations. I'm not surprised there are violations, but I'm glad that people report them to us, and we try to follow up with as many as we can. No matter who the violator is, we try to treat them initially as on the assumption that they just don't know yet, and that they simply need to be educated, and that they will become a contributor to our code bases in the future. And so we basically try to meet companies and whoever is violating the license where they are, give them some time, try to get them to come into compliance, and ultimately some do, but many don't, and we do our best to find all the different levers to get them to comply. And ultimately, when we decide who to sue and not to sue, we follow principles that we've published that everyone can see, and patches are welcome in terms of how we handle all of this. And it's tough. I mean, litigation is so expensive. We can only bring a few suits at a time, but we do have, 3 or 4 that we're working on at any given time that we haven't filed yet. And, and many of our most successful suits have come from partnering with developers in different places who are passionate and do the work themselves.
So do you see a red line, or you don't have any red line to cross?
No, any lawsuit we bring, we have to recognize it's impact litigation, meaning that any lawsuit we bring is establishing the law, especially in common law jurisdictions like the United States and the UK, but even in non-common law jurisdictions, it's still, we recognize that there haven't been that many lawsuits, and so when we bring them, that means that that's going to establish what judges think about these licenses going forward. So we make sure that the cases we bring have strong fact patterns that are easy to understand and have a good narrative behind them.
So we have 5 minutes. Do you have any question for our guest? Well, just one. I bring back.
Hi, thank you. So do you think we are still actually in control of the ethics of our machines and our technologies, or they are already taking over us and dominating human power as decision-making? Because it seems to me, in general, that those systems are so powerful that they are making us every day more unethical, but they are making it seem normality and normal every day more. Thank you. Who starts? You, Matthias.
So I missed the first part of it, but I think I got the question. So from how I understood it was that there are nowadays there's a lot of technology which makes us more unethical, right? Yes. Yes. So, I mean, I think one of the best examples of this is so-called social media, which in a lot of cases is rather asocial media, and there where there are algorithms which are not transparent towards others, and that those algorithms, they make sure that differences between people are multiplied, that hatred is multiplied, that all kind of distraction, of strong emotions are multiplied, and that on the other hand, when we think about what we have in common in our society, that is almost invisible, even so we in our society often agree on many things, that's becoming less and less visible in a world where it is decided about algorithms, which news we are reading, what messages we are receiving. And that's something which is very, very hard as an individual to understand those logics, how technology that provides us information actually works. But yeah, that's something which is very hard to counter, and where in a lot of cases it's then also something where you need to take a deliberate decision which information you receive. And also, in some cases, you have the possibility to use free software tools for that. Like we also, at this weekend, at those days here, we have the Fediverse days here as well, where you have a different way on how information is distributed there, where it's not about if I'm sending a message which is, yeah, well, it's not that clear if it's this way or that way. That message will still be in the same priority in the timeline of people who are subscribed to me, then if I say, this is bad, or, whoa, this is really good, and that's something where it helps to use the right tools, but in the end, it's also a lot of education and a lot of debates we need to have in society to counter something like this.
I have a lot of hope. I teach some law students at Columbia Law School, and I have 2 kids. And I have seen a sea change in the last 2 years where people, young people in particular, and all of you here, understand that there's an ethical basis for our technology and that there's a reason to be deeply skeptical of the solutions that are being promulgated in the way you describe. And so what I'm seeing is actually surprisingly widespread rejection from educated youth over many of these tools. And I think that, coupled with legislation, means that we have a lot of opportunity that we didn't have before. So I agree with you that some of these tools are normalizing some of this negative behavior, but I also think that there's unprecedented opportunity for change.
I think it's really important to understand where the evil is coming from here. It isn't the technology that is the origin of the evil. The origin of the evil is a surveillance capitalism. It is the aggregation of many small pieces of information that it's totally reasonable for you to make public as a human being, and using that data at scale to do things that you don't think are reasonable. And you'd be amazed where that data is coming from. That data is coming from advertising screens in the street that are noticing that your mobile phone's SSID has just walked past. It is coming from your face recognition over which you have no control as you walk into a shopping mall. So we need to understand that the problem is that. We also need to resist the technology that's exploiting it. But the thing we need to be active about telling our representatives we hate is, I don't hate advertising, I hate being tracked. That's the thing I hate. because that is at the root of the evil of many, many of these things in technology we're talking about.
I take just another question, 30 seconds, please. Okay.
I'm not sure if it's going to be 30 seconds. So really quickly, in the introductory speech, it was mentioned that I think it was German government will be moving to an open source product because of the issues with Microsoft. So what it made me think is that something really bad has to happen, something political way above these conversations for those businesses, governments to actually take action, which is disappointing because we've been preaching about this for many, many years, but this is what works. So what I'm thinking about, I don't know whether it's a question or something to think about, is shall we have a different tactics on how we communicate so that we actually getting through to those businesses? Because at the end of the day, we are selling to them. We're not selling something that they're paying for, but we are selling, we want them to adopt these open source technologies. So just a thought, how do we communicate it so it's being understood? Shall we talk more about risks? Maybe we should, I don't know, employ public relation companies to just help with the communication, because I think we're just not getting through because we don't speak the same language, and I don't mean that we should be speaking bad language or be aggressive, but yeah, how do we get through to them so they actually take action before sanctions from America come in? You know, there must be something else that we can do.
It's a big question.
So there was a
short answer.
There was a great talk by Valerie Aurora in Seminar 2 just before this session. Watch the video because she answers your question.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, makers.